Hey folks, John here, Old Hickory Forge. Welcome back. If it's your first time here, welcome. So, what's going on today? I'm out here in the workshop, and I'm actually getting moving on a personal project, if you can believe it. It's that weird dead space between Christmas and New Year's where nobody really knows what they're supposed to do or what's going on. So I'm just pushing out all the actual work I need to do until the first week of January. Taking a few days to work on a project that I've always wanted to work on. So I figured I'd bring you guys along. If you want to check it out, stick around. So this here's my shed. I keep yard work tools and stuff like that in there. And what I want to make is a sculpture for the door. I actually did make that little handle when I first moved in, but it's going to kind of get in the way of the sculpture. So we're actually going to get rid of that. And once it's all said and done, the sculpture itself is going to become the handle to the door. So the first thing I've done is take a bunch of measurements and figure out where everything is. So then I did a little bit of math and drew me up a scale model. 1 inch on this drawing equals 10 inches on the actual door, so that gives me kind of an approximate idea of where everything actually is. Drew up my lines with Sharpie and started kind of just brainstorming the sculpture. So this is the rough draft of the concept art. And the next thing we did is draw up a model with the actual measurements of the door. So this is the same size as the actual door. And then I just went at it with some chalk and kind of tried to figure out something I liked. It looks a little different from my rough draft of the concept art. And as we continue to work on the sculpture, it might end up actually looking different, because the stock we're actually going to be using is narrower than the chalk lines. The leaves might not be the same size. Things might need to get moved, so on and so forth. But the cool thing about a project like this is you have total creative license with it. So if I decide I want to change it while I'm working on it, it's not a big deal. But first thing we're going to do is take us a section of 1 inch round, 4 feet long, start tapering it down and making the stalk, and then we'll just work our way out as we go. Alrighty, so last time I did a sculpture like this, I actually had a lot of trouble with bending the stalk because I was doing it over the horn of the anvil using a mallet. So this time what I did was I made a quick little bending fork that sits down in the swage block. Hopefully that comes in handy. We got the end of our bar heating up. I got a high-tech stock holding up system going on right here. Basically, I want a gentle taper to run kind of over the course of the whole thing, so we're going to start at that end, forge it down roughly to the finished dimensions I'm looking for, which I don't know exactly what they are. I'll just kind of know when I see them. And then just work our way back up the bar and keep going. Alrighty, so we got a nice gentle taper over about the last 2/3 or so of the piece. I'm not too worried about it down near the base of the sculpture. So we're going to round everything up, grind it clean on the sander, and then we're going to go over it with this here texture tool and get us a nice tree bark texture. Should look pretty cool. So I'm just slowly working my way up the bar, doing a few inches at a time, trying to get the texturing looking nice. Because when you hit it from the top, it kind of flattens the bottom and you have to go back and forth and around and around. This is actually my first real attempt at using texture tooling under the hammer like this, and it's a lot of fun. Freaking left forearm's killing me though. Alrighty, we got the whole stalk textured. That took quite a while. But now we got this nice kind of tree bark thing going all the way up and down the piece. So next, it's just going to be a lot of going back and forth between the chalk drawing and the anvil and the bending fork, just trying to get everything bent to where it needs to go. So now it's just a matter of working our way up the piece, following the lines where they need to be. That bending fork actually works like a charm. I'm pretty happy about that. Top end of the sculpture now. It gets a little easier as you work your way up because the metal's thinner. Also because you're holding it by the heavy end rather than it being way out in front of you. But it's just bend and check, bend and check, bend and check. Nothing to it really. So I'm pretty happy with the bends and the piece that's going to become the stalk of the sculpture overall. There's a little bit of excess up at the top, but we'll cut that off before we put those branches in. But that's the most challenging or the most physically difficult part of making this whole sculpture is done. So tomorrow we'll get to work making all the branches, and from there it'll just be a bunch of leaves and a bunch of welding. So it's the next day, we're back in the shop, and I've thought about it a little bit, and rather than cutting off the excess up there at the end of the stalk, what I think I'm going to do is actually forge it down a little more to make that first limb veering off to the right, rather than cutting it back and having to fabricate two separate ones. I just think it'll make it a little bit easier, so that's what's happening now. That actually worked like a charm. I'm glad I did that. Pretty cool, this whole piece was just pulled out of one 4-foot section of steel. But anyway, we just did the same thing we did with the rest of the stalk, tapered it, rounded it up, textured it. Nothing to it really, so now we'll get to work making the branches and just working our way down the piece. The order of march with all the branches is pretty much the same as it was with the stalk. You know, taper, smooth up the taper, texture the taper and everything. Biggest things you got to worry about is trying to match up the thickness of the branch with that of the stalk so the lines kind of flow and it looks as natural as possible. But that's really all there is to it, so I'm just going to work my way down the sculpture. I do think what I'm going to do for the bigger branches is try to make the central part all out of one piece, kind of like I did with the stalk. You know, less cutting and welding I have to do, the better. But we'll just work our way down. Nothing to it, really. This bending fork is a really good idea. Alrighty, it's the next day. All the branches are tapered, textured, bent, all that good stuff. So now it's time to actually start putting it together. I've gone ahead and cleaned up all the welding surfaces as well as drilled the holes that are going to be used to mount it to the door later. We got the welder posted up, and we'll get welding. Alrighty, we got everything put together. I'll be the first to admit I'm a pretty terrible welder. You know, grinder and paint makes me the welder I ain't. But let's go ahead and see if it passes the drop test. Good to go. Alrighty, so it's welded up, cleaned up, looking pretty good. Next thing we gotta do is make a whole slew of leaves. So if anybody needs me for like the next 57 years, I'll be here making leaves. To forge out all the leaves, I'm basically just kind of roughing it out at the anvil, dressing up the shape with the sander. I'm using a texture tool under the press to put the veins in. Cupping it under the swage block, I'll cut it off from the parent bar and kind of fit it up where it needs to go. But that's the process. That's one down. We got like 60 more to go, so let's get after it. Alrighty, so I'm undoubtedly going to be seeing leaves in my sleep for the rest of my life, but we got them all done. Next step is going to be to tack everything together down here while it's on the floor. None of the leaves are welded on yet. Then we'll move the whole deal up to the welding table, do all the structural welds, do all the cleanup, most of which is probably going to have to be done with a round file, which is going to kind of suck. But it is what it is. You know, the leaves turned out to be the real meat and potatoes of this project. I said in a previous video that this sculpture was something I could bang out in a weekend or a few days, and now it's been here on the floor for about a month. Because, you know, each one of those leaves takes about 20-30 minutes to make, and the artist on me really kind of came out with this project. I've actually redone several of these branches 3 or 4 times because, you know, it's like, that's too many leaves, that's not enough leaves, that's too close together, that's too far apart, that's too curved, that's not curved enough. And you also just kind of have to listen to the material and let it tell you what it wants to be. So we've deviated from the concept art quite a bit, but I think it looks good. I'm happy with it. Let's get to welding. So we got all the tacking done. All the leaves are attached. A lot of them are kind of crooked and tweaked and whatnot, but that's fine. Once all the welding is done and all the cleanup work done, we're going to go over the whole thing with the torch and kind of bend and tweak every leaf exactly where it needs to go. All that matters right now is that it's together. So if we can get it from the floor to the welding table without it falling apart, we'll be doing pretty good. All right. Alrighty, so we got all the leaves welded on. I haven't done any of the cleanup work or anything like that yet. Before we go any further, I'm going to drop test it. I know there's no reason in the world for this and nobody asked for this, but let's give it a go. If it holds up, it means my welds are good. Still in one piece. So, we got all the leaves welded on. It passed the drop test. Things are looking pretty good. Next step is to go ahead and clean everything up and get it ready for painting. The front and the back of the sculpture, the welds I should be able to get to and clean pretty easily with a flap disc. Down on the bottom, I'm going to try to do it with the die grinder. I might end up having to use a hand file. You know, we'll see. I actually also purposely didn't weld on the inside of each one to make cleanup in that aspect easier. If I have to, I'll get in here with a needle file. We'll kind of just see what we're looking at once we get moving, but now that it's starting to look like something, I'm pretty excited, boys. So, we got all the cleanup work done and everything. I went over it with the wire wheel to knock all the spatter from the welding off and everything. I was going to go through and try to straighten up the leaves, but none of them are really that out of line. And I actually, the more I look at it, the more I kind of like it. I feel like it adds a little more depth and liveliness to the sculpture and makes it look a little more natural. So I'm going to call it good here. Let's get some paint on this guy. I decided at the last minute to add my touch mark, and then I double stamped it, so sculpture's ruined. Gotta throw it out, start over. I'm kidding, obviously. It'll be fine. I kind of just wanted to put it there because this is going to be here long after I'm dead. And I kind of thought it might be cool that years and years and years from now somebody might find this and be like, hey, you know, here's the guy who made this. But anyway, let's get some paint on it. Alrighty, we got it installed. Looks pretty stinking cool, I think. I chose to go ahead and take the handle off the door because it kind of mussed up the look, if that makes sense. And also I plan on just using the sculpture as the handle in the future, and it kind of got in the way and so on and so forth. It just looks better like this. It does interfere with the door opening ever so slightly, not very much at all, because the door is recessed into the stonework like that. On the right, some of the leaves hit. But I mean, it only opens like an inch less than it did before, so I'm really not too worried about it at all. And if it really bothers me, I can always take it off, heat it up, and bend some of those branches in. So all in all, I'm pretty happy with the way the project came out. I think it looks great. All in all, I had a great time making this project, and I'm pretty happy with how it came out. You know, even if it did take much longer than I thought it was going to finish. Like I said in a previous video, this was something I thought I could bang out in, you know, a weekend, which ended up taking, you know, a month or so to finish. But it's done. I learned a lot. It really pushed my boundaries as a blacksmith as well as an artist. You know, it's all part of the never-ending pursuit of greatness. But if you like what you saw, like, share, subscribe, all that jazz. Always more cool stuff coming. Now that this thing is finally done and not taking up a huge chunk of my shop floor, I can give the Patreon giveaways that I'm 6 months behind on my full attention. So patrons, be on the lookout for those. Links down in the description box below to the social media if you want to follow me. If you want to stay up to date with the goings on here at the shop, Instagram is the best place. I'm the most active on that platform. I also post pictures of my cats and memes to my story that I think are funny sometimes, so you might like that. There's also links to the Patreon if you want to become a supporter of the channel, as well as my Etsy if you'd like to purchase any of my work. But that's all I got for you, and y'all take care.